Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, desolations, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome and good morning. And today I want to go back to Syria and talk about an interesting little event. And these are the kind of stories I tend to look for. I'm not competing against the uber patriots out there and the news hounds. I like stories like this that really display the complexity and absurdity of all these situations going on geopolitically around the world. On the surface, it seems like this is the adult world, but underneath it, he speaks of an immaturity of humanity in general. But anyway, I digress. It's early in the morning. But this story is about ISIS is now trying to infiltrate what's called the Yarmouk refugee camp in the Damascus suburbs. And this is 4 miles outside of Damascus proper. So this is interesting for a number of reasons. We have, of course, ISIS on the very doorsteps of the capital of Syria, threatening the Assad government. And there's about 15 to 20,000 refugees in this camp, and they're Palestinian militias. And so the complexity of this situation is the fact that we have ISIS on the doors of the capital, as I mentioned, but also the fact that technically we have Hamas clashing with ISIS here in Syria now, because a number of these Palestinian militias who have apparently pushed back the ISIS assault, and these Palestinian militias, many of them are loyal to Hamas. So I enjoy this fact because it undermines this propaganda narrative of Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, who talks about the idea that Hamas somehow and ISIS somehow are the same thing, and couldn't be further from the truth. And one of the other interesting things about this is that ISIS is collaborating with al-Nusra Front in this area. So once again, we have al-Nusra Front aligned with al-Qaeda, theoretically, who are clashing with ISIS in the rest of Syria, and yet in this region we find them collaborating once again. So this also helps to undermine this idea that there are any moderate rebels to speak of, and that the flux between ISIS and al-Qaeda will continue to the point where I would imagine at some point there will not be al-Qaeda affiliates anymore. They will all be absorbed into ISIS. And the other interesting thing about this scenario here, it's another one of those stories that has epic qualities that you just don't hear about in the media. This Yarmouk refugee camp, only 3 years ago, it's been under siege for 3 years. They haven't had any water for the last year. 95% of the people there rely on UN aid. But more interestingly, only 4 years ago, anywhere between, I've seen numbers quoted that are all over the map, but anywhere between 160,000 and 500,000 Palestinians lived in this camp before the war. And now there's only 15 to 20,000 left. So virtually an entire city 4 years ago has been moved. And they were caught between the crossfire between the rebels and government troops, and they left. But to get back to the big picture, of course, we have airstrikes by the U.S. Relatively ineffective as new ISIS assaults and offenses are launched all over Syria. But also the fact that we can have ISIS pushing further and further towards the Syrian capital. And it shows that ISIS is still continuing to operate from a position of strength, that the U.S. policy is floundering, and that the ISIS are going back to their main goal, which is to topple the Assad government. And that's pretty interesting in itself, that we have, once again, ISIS collaborating with al-Qaeda in some parts of the country, clashing with al-Qaeda in some parts of the country, and ISIS being the only ones who are keeping their eye on the ball of taking the Assad government down. So that helps feed into those who believe that the U.S. and Israel and Saudi Arabia are supportive of ISIS, because that's the fact that the only people taking down the Assad government right now are the very demons that the United States is fighting. And but this is, like I say, this is an interesting development, particularly in light of the fact that the most recent story is that Palestinian militias have fought back against ISIS and pushed them out of this camp for the time being. But there you have it. Nice little interesting historical factoid that we now have Hamas fighting against ISIS in Syria. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.